this week's episode of Tales of Abundance. As always, I'm here with Dr. John and Anthony. Good afternoon, gentlemen.
Afternoon.
All right, well, let's jump in. Abundance briefing. John, you had some things that I know excited you, so you want to kick us off there?
Yeah, I mean, just cool stuff in the news, right? Like, I think the one that was I was most enthusiastic about was the American Cancer Society just released in the last few days their cancer statistics for 2026, and it confirmed that a 5-year survival rate for all cancers combined has reached 70% for the first time ever. That's pretty cool. My life's been touched by cancer in the sense that my dad passed away of cancer when I was really young. It's been a theme of, I think a lot of people's lives. And so super enthusiastic to see we're making progress there. And then when I was looking at that, a couple other things jumped out in the news. One was that Stanford just published a report in Nature Materials on January 16th that if you put a very thin layer of silver coating over a solid state battery, it's 5 times more resistant to cracking of a certain type that causes a battery to fail. So we kind of a cool breakthrough in battery technology. And then a couple of countries, Chile and Thailand, both made really big conservation news. Chile for putting aside 150,000 hectares of national park to protect sub-Antarctic peat land and forest land. And then in Thailand, there's a really cat they thought was extinct they caught on camera for the first time in 35 years. So just some feel-good news stories in a news cycle that doesn't always feel awesome. I just saw those things and they all made me smile with different levels of enthusiasm.
John, the cancer thing is obviously really cool because I think everybody knows somebody that, or has been affected personally. So
Sure.
it's 70% now. What was it? Do we know what it was 5, 10, 20 years ago? Do we have any idea or no? Does it not mention?
It said that it was up from 49% in the mid 70s.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
I'm surprised it was that high in the mid 70s actually, but that's fantastic.
Yeah.
You know my feelings on this. Chemotherapy is great. It's saving lives, and it's simultaneously barbaric as hell. It's pumping poison into people's bodies and doing all but killing them. It's the best we have right now. I just think in 50 or 100
Well,
years,
I
we're
mean,
gonna look back.
immunotherapy has come a long way, Randy. I think
Yeah.
immunotherapies, and then there's a student at UT who just put together something about like how cancer cells live and die that I haven't had a chance to read yet, but it looked pretty promising too. So I
Right.
think we're making some progress.
There's a lot being done with everything from hyperbaric chambers to huge doses of vitamin C, et cetera. So
Yeah.
we're moving there, but it's the fact that we're at 70% is pretty cool. When
Well,
you
not my
men-
field, but I do know a couple. I know a couple of oncologists. Maybe we'll bring one on and have them talk about the latest, greatest treatments.
when you mentioned the batteries and the silver, I couldn't help but think silver prices have been exploding over the last couple months. So it made me think: Are they buying so much silver that? But I don't think that's the problem. But anyway, Anthony, sorry, you were saying something.
No, what I was going to say is, I can part of the reason why the 5-year horizon has increased so much could be related to earlier detection of cancers, and but obviously the earlier you detect something, the better the odds are of survival. So I think there's more and more talk about in the longevity universe of exactly that, full body scans earlier in life and trying to catch all kinds of problems with health much earlier, and then remediating those things so that this will continue.
Yeah.
Yeah, the silver thing is interesting, isn't it? Did you know that the contracts that are out there for silver, those that are buying options, predicting silver will continue to go up, far exceed the actual amount of silver that exists in the world. So there are those out there that think that there could be a black swan event, meaning that when the banks, who are the ones who are pretty much on the hook for it, when people want their silver, businesses need their silver and so forth, there'll be a resetting, not of the price, but of the rules, allowing who's going to get the silver and so forth. But anyway,
Well,
I just thought that
what'll
was
happen, again, I
interesting.
think humans are incredibly resourceful and it will create shortages. And this is why I always talk about buying things that are scarce, right? That like fiat dollars or US dollars have no value because they can just change some numbers on a keyboard and make them, right? And this is why I always come back to Bitcoin. But again, if I wasn't in Bitcoin, it'd be gold and silver. Buying something that's real that they can't just make more of without work, right? Like they can mine more silver or
Right.
gold, but it takes money, it takes capital, it takes energy, it takes all those things. So buy scarce assets is my strong opinion. So the other thing with scarcity, the thing that kind of jumped out to me, I read an article over the weekend that China in particular, but there's multiple countries doing it now, are creating more land. And they're creating prime real estate. They're going out and creating islands off their shores by taking massive amounts of sand. And I think they're using concrete and probably some rebar and whatever else. But they're creating these structures. I witnessed this firsthand a few years ago when we were down in Panama. There's from like this real high end area that would almost remind you of Manhattan. Uh, you go down this road and it just goes out onto an island, or there's a couple of them that they've made down there years ago. And certainly we know about, Dubai has the island that looks like the palm trees, and I think they might even have another one now. So I think that's pretty cool too. And we always talk about real estate. I bring that up in the scarcity thing because we talk about real estate. They're not making any more of it. Well, actually, that's not true. They are
Yeah,
making
they,
more. So
Yeah.
they are making more. And I think where you live, John, like how many people lived in downtown Austin 20 or 25 years ago? And now they're, you guys are stacked down there like crazy. I mean, it's done, went from just businesses to, dense population pretty quickly.
True story.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that's it for the abundance briefing. We will be back after the break, and we are going to talk about kind of a fun episode today, but also I think one for just general life skills. What if we treated people like we treated dogs? Is the question that we're going to answer. So we'll dig into that when we get back from the break. Hey, it's Randy from Tales of Abundance. Is starting a business part of your journey? Do you have ambition but no clear path? Maybe you feel trapped in your current career. Do you want a real business that can produce $250,000 or more income for you and your family? We have an opportunity for a profitable business that can be part of your path to abundance. I want to personally invite you to see the proven system we've built. It's designed to give you that freedom and control you've been searching for. Visit premiumcabinets.com/abundance to learn more. That's premiumcabinets.com/abundance. Listeners, we are back from break, and this is just it's fun, but I also think this is something that can increase our interpersonal communications, maybe our management skills. I think this really applies to a lot of things, even though it's going to sound kind of silly. And I will tell you that we got a dog about 6 months ago. His name's Duke. I call him the Duke of Joy because he's so damn happy, and his tail's wagging, and he's just a happy dog, and he brings joy to the world. And one day I came home. I think I was at the gym for an hour. And I came back and he meets me at the door and he's jumping around and he's so freaking happy to see me, right? As if I'd been gone for 2 years or something. And, I was thinking how wonderful it is, but then I started thinking, well, why is this? Like, why are dogs, is that what dogs are? But I think how great we treat dogs, right? We take care of them, we give them a place to sleep, we bathe them, we buy them toys, they do any little thing and we're like, oh, who's a good boy, right? Or, oh, how smart are you? We pet them, we do, it's like they poop outside instead of in the house, and we give them treats for it and we congratulate them. So, I guess I'm asking the question, is it a chicken or the egg, right? Is what would happen if we treated people the way we treated dogs? What would that do to our relationships? What would that do to the world? So, any opening thoughts here, gentlemen?
yeah. Let me relay a personal experience that I at first didn't like the topic because someone like a dog just doesn't sound like a good thing. But the over the weekend, I was fortunate enough to not be able to use my tea time, and I had to go to a 2-year-old's birthday party. It happened to be my granddaughter. And I was thinking about this topic while we were there because it's very similar. What you just talked about is very similar to how you treat a toddler and a little baby. You know, when the little baby, I have a 6-month-old granddaughter. When she smiles, the room lit up, and everyone was excited about, oh my gosh, she's smiling. I made her smile. I mean, she could have been farting for all we knew, but she was smiling. We petted her, and when the 2-year-old wanted to get in the bouncy house and started jumping around, we were encouraging her, and we were laughing, and we were making her feel great. And she was barely jumping in the bouncy house, but you would have thought she was an Olympic gymnast on the uneven parallel bars. So I was thinking, we actually do treat people as well as we treat dogs for a pretty short period of time.
Yeah.
And then we devolve, I think. And I don't want to paint with one brush when that happens, but it does seem to devolve as they get older and our expectations get higher. So I think that's the root of some of what we're going to talk about.
Yeah. I think that's a great insight. Great insight. John, you have any opening thoughts here, or anything?
Yeah, I mean, I think we come at this from the positive side, right? But I think there is the good, the bad, and the ugly. And so I think that when I think about this with my professional background, I think about like all the positive things we have because of relationships with dogs. But I also think about what would happen if we treated humans in that same paradigm, and it's a pretty slippery slope. So I think there's some real learnings about how we can treat people better, for sure. And there's some slippery slopes, I think, as well. So I'm super excited to kind of get deep into the conversation, for sure.
Okay. Well, I'm curious to know what your takes are on that. So,
Let me start. I'll tell you a quick. I'll tell you one quick story. Then I'll tell you where we start. So I have a dog who was she was abused before we got her. We took her from a family who was going to have her put to sleep because she was not playing well with other dogs. We learned from her veterinarian that she had been living on the street for 6 months to a year, had been abandoned on more than one occasion, had a long history with kind of the shelters. And we took her in when she was about 3 years old, and she lived to about 13, 14 for a large dog, 35, 40 pounds. And I'm Catholic, and so when I went to actually put her to sleep, I had a conversation with my priest about like, was this, what does the Bible say about this? I'm a new convert at the time, and had some real theological questions around it. And one of the things that he made me aware of was like in the Bible, in Genesis, it talks about how man has kind of dominion over the animals. And so I was like, oh, well, I guess I can put him to sleep. I definitely don't feel that way about humans. So whether you're Catholic or not, whether you're, it was a difference about, and there are some people who would, think that putting their animal to sleep wouldn't be great. And there are people that would treat their pet, if it had cancer in the same way that you might treat a family member. So I recognize there's different ways to approach it, but I do think that like the law says that people and that animals are different. Psychology and psychologists would say they're very different, and there's different power dynamics. And so I think that it's a really cute conversation to start, and there is lots of positive lessons to learn about how we could treat people better, and some people could treat animals better, but there are some dark sides too we can get into. So
Well, again, I really think the chicken or egg. Like, I think part of the reason we treat dogs so well is because they treat us so well, right? They just come with nothing but love. The other big thing is it's their interpretation. So many times as a human, somebody does something, and even when it's of the best of intentions, and they're like, I really want to help this person, the human looks at it and goes, what are they trying to get out of it? Or what are, and they start questioning the purity. And dogs don't do that. They just take everything as the best, right? And so I think that's just another way. And this ties into years ago I read Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. I mean, it's been 30 years ago now, or 35 years ago plus probably. But a lot of this is those same concepts, right?
Yeah.
What about listening, right? Like if you think about a dog too, when you come home or you engage with a dog, they are fully invested, right? Like they are, or how many times with humans are we talking to somebody or somebody's talking to us and we're on our phone answering an email or a text or whatever else, right? And we're kind of half listening. So I think a lot of it just starts with they're there 100% in the relationship in that moment. Thoughts? I mean, John, you have the medical degree here. What's your takeaway on that?
I have a social work degree. I think, I mean, it's so deep. I mean, you're saying that we love dogs because they love us. And I mean, so I don't know the answer to this one. I certainly don't know the psychology of pets at all. I would question though, like, is this a chicken or the egg question? You know? Um, and how much of this is nature versus nurture with animals? I mean, I mean, there was a dog once in my life. I've had a dog run off of a porch and try to attack someone that I was walking with. And I didn't love that dog. And that dog certainly didn't love me, you know. So I do think there's a lot of the nurturing of an animal that drives their behavior towards humans, and part of that may be personality too. I don't know.
Yeah, a dog only needs a few things, right? It needs a safe place to go. It needs its food and water. It's not, it likes to play, chase a ball, run around a little bit. There's a lot more going on in our relationship with, you know, the rest of society. They have needs, we have needs. They may be under pressure, we're under pressure. Things need to get done. Maybe we're, with a puppy, generally we're given a very clear command. We're usually pretty calm unless something, there's some biting or some messes being made. We're pretty consistent with what we want from our pets. We're not changing it every day on them. Whereas in running a business or in your personal life, you know, life happens and business situations occur. So we're in a not a well, maybe in a constant state of flux, requiring change management techniques. And so it's a tougher kind of environment. And then there's personality. There's the innate personality that we all have. Some of us, like myself, are very calm and cool and collected and never with not much emotion. Others are a little more active in that way, and because each of us are so different, we react differently to different stimuli. So it's not easy. I would say that was a tough part of this. It's not easy in the real world to always be in the state of mind you'd be in if you were sitting on the couch with a puppy on your lap.
Yeah,
So
I think that's really good insight, Anthony. And the other thing that it sparked in my head was just expectations, right? Like so much of our happiness and being just generally okay with things are things hitting expectations. And so, it makes me think we have a lot lower expectations for a dog than we have for a human, right?
sure.
So I think that's great. John,
Oh,
part of,
well, don't jump off that too quick. I think what you just said, Randy, there's a lot of there's a lot of utility in that, right? Like if I lower my expectations of you, another way of saying that would be if I always assign positive intent or give you the benefit of the doubt, like which is a core relationship skill, by the way,
right.
right? We've talked about core relationship skills lots of times, but giving someone the benefit of the doubt is a core relationship skill. And so I don't know. I just want to put a pin in that because I think that's something that if whether we do it for an animal or not is a great skill to have with humans in our life.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's great. Um, what? Let's get into the biology of this a little bit, John. And I don't know that I prepped you for this, but if you think about when a dog greets you and they're all in and they're excited and they're happy and they're making eye contact and all of that, what is happening biologically? Like what is that doing to us?
Yeah, I mean, let me just start by saying I don't know. You didn't prep me, but I'll guess. I think what happens is you probably have probably some serotonin that hits the brain, right? That's it's an immediate kind of positive impact, which probably does some things hormonally, like maybe it lowers cortisol or reduces other things that are causing stress in life. Probably changes breathing patterns to kind of reduce stress further. There's a lot of science about um, you know, the stress being relieved by animals, which is why you see these emotional support animals on planes regularly. That's a whole nother conversation for a different day. But I do think that animals can help people emotionally regulate, which is a great thing. And so I think there are people that don't get the maximum value out of that, probably. But I mean, who doesn't want somebody to have unlimited positive regard for them,
Yeah.
right? And so assuming that that animal is not scared of you and that you've got a good relationship, I think you're going to see a lot of that. And so um, that's a pretty cool thing to have.
First thing, I like this Dr. John that's willing to guess. That's my first takeaway from this. My second thing is when as you said that, it made me think like, yeah, when I walk in the door and that dog comes up and he is so excited, it really does melt away anything, at least for a moment, right? It's like, oh, and I'm petting him and saying hello, and it really does change your state really quickly. So,
It's interesting in some of the science around romantic relationships, marriages, there's a talk about a connection in that same way. And I've heard therapists talk about like a long hug. And I can't remember if it's a 6 second hug or a 20-second hug or whatever it was. And the Gottmans talk about the 6 second kiss. Well, I think those are similar types of impact, if I had to guess, since you like the guessing, where it really brings you present in the moment, connected, loving. Like, I think those are all things that are generally human connection or connection that are good for humans.
Anthony, what would change if we treated everybody like this when they came in? We gave them a tail wagging, happy, the human equivalent of that when we greeted a person. Or what if, the way that you started at the beginning talking about your 2 year old granddaughter, if we treated everybody like that, like what would that change?
Well, as I think about it, the what keeps coming into my mind is, when that you come through the door, when you're talking about coming through the door, and where are your best relationships? I've been with the same person in my life for over 50 years, and what bubbles up in my brain is the level of trust I have in my relationship is directly correlates to the amount of happiness I have in that relationship. When you walk through the door, that dog trusts that you are going to feed him, bathe him, water him, walk him, and so forth. And my best relationships and my biggest successes in my career have been centered around the trust I have in the product or in the people or in the building I'm in, my commute, all of those things, the level of trust you have really is at the core of it. So I think abundance gets created by trust. If the more you can trust, like John and I would have conversations in a business that we were in the past of, you really can't question someone's intent. Don't question the intent. Let's work through that. Let's assume that they're coming from a good place. Let's trust them, and so on and so forth. Sometimes we got burned. Most of the times, not so. It was an effort to trust, but it worked out in the end. And the other thing that comes up, and again, this goes back to a business John and I ran in the past, and I apply it. It's a value, right? A core value is kindness. When you lead with kindness, it's probably the most influential tool that you can apply, in a relationship. And so you're not going to kick your dog. You're going to be kind to your dog. You're not going to kick your employees, or you shouldn't be kicking your employees. You should be kind to your employees. And by doing that, kindness begets kindness, and that's the perfect world. Now we're not all perfect. Sometimes you're going to yell at the dog when he pees in the corner and whatever. But in general, that dog can trust you to be kind.
Yeah.
I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, it's interesting. When I was a kid, we had dogs, and my dad's way of teaching them was more like beat their ass if they did something wrong, right? And it worked. Eventually, the dog stopped doing that behavior, and it figured it out. But I'm looking, and now I think this dog is particularly smart, but we just gave him treats when he did the right thing, and it's unbelievable how quickly he picks things up. He's like, oh, I do this, I get a treat, right? For me, it was first, take him outside to go to the bathroom, and every time he does it, he got a little treat. Julie is more interested in, having him lay down and shake and things like that. But it doesn't matter what it is; they learn it. Where, you know, I think managing people, right? You're talking about. I mean, to go deeper down that, I think there's a lot of power in that. Like giving them,
Yep.
the carrot, or you accomplish this, and they know they get a certain reward. I mean, it doesn't have to be financial. It could just be an attaboy.
Yeah, I'm going to jump out onto a limb here again and speaking to places I don't have a lot of expertise, but I'm going to try to bring some things together. Dog training, as I understand it, is a lot about um, intermittent reinforcement that is kind of not regularly timed. Whereas the most healthy human relationships, I'm going to go back to the research on marriage that I'm familiar with. In a healthy marriage, you have 20 pieces of positive feedback for every one piece of negative feedback. And in times of conflict, you have 5 pieces of positive feedback for one piece of negative feedback. And I think those are probably pretty different in terms of how humans treat humans and how humans treat dogs. And I'm making a pretty big leap here, but I think that there's a big difference that probably where we shouldn't kind of use it as a one-to-one. But I think as an analogy, it's great. The reality is that people generally respond much better to positive reinforcement than negative reinforcement. I think that's true for dogs as well. So like if that's the level we're staying at, like thumbs up, I think I'm all on board. If it's like, hey, we should train humans the way we train dogs, I think then you're manipulating a relationship where there might need to be an even power dynamic for friends, for example, or a specific power dynamic between boss and employee or parent and child that are really different than animal and master.
So you just gave the example 20 to 1 is a good relationship, 5 to 1 positive to negative is a bad relationship. What do you think is
No,
average?
relationship and conflict. I want to just
Okay,
clarify that.
okay. Relationship and conflict. What do you think the average boss slash manager slash owner, whatever, versus an employee? What do you think that ratio is? I mean,
Two to five to
you've
one.
advised, I don't know, a zillion
Yeah,
businesses, and I mean, you've been
yeah.
around this your whole life, right? What do you think?
It's a lot closer to the conflict number than it is to the healthy dynamic number. And as a result of that, I think you have a lot of people who feel like they have conflict with their boss when maybe they don't have conflict with their boss. And because bosses are wired in their minds in a lot of cases to fix problems, instead of keeping things on the rails. And, a mentor of mine once said, like, if you've got, 2% of the things are problematic in your company and 98% are good, and you talk 90% of the time about the things that are bad, you're going to get more problems. You're not going to get more good behavior. So you need to really do a better job of reinforcing the stuff you want.
Yeah.
And so I think that's really sage advice. It's not just about solving problems. It's about reinforcing the behavior that you want by
I don't know about that. I don't know.
Oh,
Let me push on that a little bit.
sure.
Using two people that are probably as successful as anybody on the planet, Bezos and Musk. we talked in one of our episodes about go to the red light.
Okay, well,
You
pause.
know,
Pause. Those people may be successful, Anthony, but they are terrible managers of people. Everyone knows it. And both, I don't know about Elon, but certainly the people around Jeff Bezos told him that if he continued to manage the way he managed it, he'd manage Amazon right out of business. And so that's why you have people like the people like the Google people brought in Eric Schmidt for a period, and they had a whole bunch of professional managers around them. Steve Jobs had Tim Cook. Like, you can go success story after success story. The guy who's running Amazon now worked for Jeff Bezos and was a buffer between him and the business. So we're talking about good relationships and good management. If you just had those guys without the professional managers as a buffer, I don't think you ever get those companies.
okay, so I wasn't going where you just went.
Okay, sorry.
Well,
I was a bad listener myself then.
yeah, I agree with that.
It won't be the last time.
Where I was going was, Bezos and Musk and good managers want to know where the problems are in their businesses, right? They want to find the problems. They don't want to just hear about good news. So the circumstance of that almost forces people to have a 5-to-1 or 3-to-1 ratio between, positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement. Just the circumstance of the way you run your
Yeah,
business.
disagree.
That doesn't mean you shouldn't seek out and find the opportunities to praise and so forth. The old shit sandwich, analogy. Two pieces of good news centered around one not so good, things like that. So I just think the circumstances, and if you're as long as you're conscious of that, and not just a jerk about the way you run your business, I think it's just the way it's going to be. You're going to be talking more about problems than you are going to be talking about the successes
Yeah, I don't know,
because you got
Anthony.
to fix them.
I don't think
Take more time.
yeah, I don't agree with that. I don't think talking about positive reinforcement is always about what's going well or what's going right. It can just be, hey, how are you? It can be anything that's a positive stroke, psychologically for somebody. It doesn't have to be talking about you did great here, you did great there, you did great here, you did great there. It can just be a positive interaction. And I think that candidly, managers who don't think that way are going to lose people in the future because you have a workforce today, the younger workforce in particular, that's more tuned into this. And I just think that the way you're talking about it is a way of management thinking that is going to lead to poorer outcomes and
Yeah,
performance.
I don't think you're hearing me, but let me try come at it another way.
Sure.
I don't disagree with anything you said in terms of the way the best managers will find reason to praise and to be positive and have a bounce in their step in their environment. The same thing in a family. If Randy talked about his dad and the way he trained his dogs. That was the way my father trained us.
Yeah, me too.
You know, so and I
And
bore the scars of
my
that.
work here is done. Thank you. The prosecution rests.
So where I'm going. So let's just use the example of 10 upbeat messages and one downbeat message. The work that has to go into solving the issue around the downbeat message is far greater than the work that's going to go around after the praise. So you're in a difficult situation that you want to solve. So you're going to spend much more time on that particular negative issue, and that creates a difficult environment. I mean, that's difficult. In business, it could be a really perplexing problem. It could be a competitive issue, a safety issue. It could be all kinds of things, and so you're going to spend a lot of time on that. And I agree with you. Because of that, you have to be aware of the 5-to-1 in reverse in terms of 5 minutes of work versus 1 minute of praise creates a tough environment to deal with. So
Yeah, but
you
you
just have to
just
be aware of it.
hold on. You just conflated something. It's not 1 minute to 5 minutes and 1 minute to 20 minutes. It's interactions, right? So it's like
Yeah.
just and there's a lot of things you can do to give somebody a psychological stroke and acknowledgement, whatever. And so I've met many managers throughout the years that have said to me, "Well, I pay their paycheck. It's their job to do their job," and that's just a fundamental miss. It's a fundamental miss about how to get somebody engaged and to keep them engaged. It's a fundamental miss about strong leadership. And so I would say there are times that great leaders give people corrective feedback in a way that comes off as a positive and doesn't create conflict in a psychologically safe environment. And I'm not talking about a coddling environment. I think anybody who's worked with me would tell you that I don't generally coddle people that I work with. But I hope, and you know people that I work with. You should ask them when I'm not in the room if it's a psychologically safe environment, and if they get more gratitude than they get correction, right? So last week I had a correction with someone. We had to fix a situation, nothing that someone did bad, but we had to fix a situation. And I've been over backwards to let them know. It's like, hey, look, I'm upset about the situation. I'm not upset with you. I want to correct this. And I want to and so there was a lot of work done to make sure that there was just the right environment for the blame free, solution focused environment. So we could both be free to lean into it without emotionally feeling protective.
I don't know that there's a.
Well, I also think,
Go ahead, Anthony.
go ahead, Randy. No, what I was going to say is, the if in the right, you're talking about the right environment, right? The best way to do things, and it really comes down to creating an environment where people are free to express, and they have the authority to take appropriate action when there's an issue. You know, quoting Charlie Munger, show me the incentive and I'll show you the outcome.
Yeah,
If you can get the incentives aligned, you can reduce the amount of times you have to be in conflict, right? Because the person already has the incentive to improve and go find their own problems and solve them before they become, too big, and so forth and so
that's
on.
right.
Same thing in any kind of family environment.
I also think
The
this is.
incentives drive behavior.
I also think this is individualized. This isn't necessarily a one size fits all. There are people
100%.
there are people that respond to the negative, right? And I know even me and my own things, if 98% is going right and 2% is going wrong, I want to fix the 2% that's going wrong. So if, as a manager or business owner, that tends to be where I lean. Like that's a battle I have to not focus on the 2%. So I want to come back. I'm going to ask how you guys in the past have done, how do you foster this environment in a business? Before we get to that though, I have noticed the other big danger if you go negative all the time is it creates fear. People are scared to give their opinions. They're scared to improve. They're scared to take chances and innovate, which I think is a real problem versus encouraging that type of behavior, right? And I think some of that has been done before they worked in our companies. I think a lot of that's just after they're no longer your 2-year-old granddaughter, people start shooting down ideas and telling them why it won't work. So I think they come to us broken a lot of times. But so how do you, whether it's that creating that atmosphere where they can contribute, or just how do you add more positive? How do you treat them more like a dog that's happy to see them and give them great feedback? I mean, what lessons have you guys learned over the years?
Well, for me, I was brought up in a couple of autocratic businesses, big companies where it was all about problems. It almost never was there any kind of celebration. And John will attest to this. Over the years, if you look at employee surveys of big companies, the number one dissatisfier wasn't how much money they made. It was one, two, and three. Number one, I'm not recognized for what I do. Number two, you don't give me the tools I need to do my job. And number three was my income. It was universal across. I don't care what company you were working for in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s. Those were the top things. So that taught me a lot about empowerment, recognition, building teams, right? Um, there's a wonderful Japanese saying that I would not, can't do justice to it, but it translates roughly in English is to bring your problems into the sunshine. I think the American version is sunshine is the greatest disinfectant. So recognizing we have problems, talking about them in a honest and productive way of with the team, if you will. And that worked really well for me in my last company, having a team involved in the problem solving, whether it was one individual's problem or it was a problem that found its thread through multiple departments that had to be solved and so on and so forth. Usually that's the case in business. A problem is not isolated to one department. It has an impact on more than one. So bringing the team together to help solve it, be aware of it, acknowledge
Yeah.
it, and then make decisions. The big companies I was in, we had the same problem, it seemed, every year, every quarter. We never seemed to solve the damn thing, right? Because it was like a government. Yeah, oh yeah, we got a problem, we got a healthcare issue. Okay, go study it. In small business, we're able to, okay, we got a problem. Shit, we better fix it, or we're going to be in, we're not going to make payroll. So, so, and by having a team involved, and we used EOS as our model. I think you guys use it too. That's how I would approach it. And I frankly, I apply that now in family life. There's a lot more groupthink, if you will, or group involvement in decisions we're making, whether it's where we're going to live, how we're going to live, what vacation we're going to take, and so forth. Whereas 10, 20 years ago it was up to me, whether anybody liked it or not. So, it's an evolution as well.
John,
So.
what do you?
Yeah, I think for me, it started a lot more central to me in this one. I was constantly focused on problems and I was firefighting all day long. And I believed my job was to take out problems in the same way that a skeet shooter took out the clay pigeon. And so that's all I focused on. And so when I realized that wasn't the right approach, I really started identifying what I was grateful for. And then I trained myself that as I thought what I was grateful for, I just let it flow out my mouth. So if I see it and I'm grateful for it, I say it. So see it, say it, see it, say it. And I still am not perfect at that today, but I really try to speak my gratitude far more often than I used to. And I think this goes back to a guy named Gary Chapman's work. He started off with the love languages for marriages, but then moved into what the love languages are at work. And one of those love languages is words of affirmation for some people, not me. And we tend to give what we want, right? So I'm somebody who wants quality time, which is focus and attention. And is one of my top two or three, and words of affirmation is one of my bottom two. And so I've realized that a lot of people appreciate words of affirmation, so I give them, and I find it works much better for me. So I think for me, it was about A, learning about gratitude, and B, as soon as it registered the gratitude, learning how to get it out of my mouth so people could hear it, and that changed, I think, a lot for the people around me. I think.
Okay.
Although I'm really curious now to know if that's true from people around me.
Well, I think the love languages thing, I mean, that could be a whole episode to itself and how to apply that. Let's wrap this thing up. I'm going to leave listeners with a little thought experiment or to take this. If you were going to treat people more like dogs, the positive aspect of it tomorrow, what would you do? What would you change? I challenge you to do that. If you don't know where to start, I would say, what if everybody we greeted, we gave them 10 seconds of we're completely involved, we're completely present, we have eye contact, we've got a smile on our face, we're happy, we're encouraging, we compliment them. If you just try that for a week. If just the first time you greet everybody, I mean, that would be an interesting thought experience. See what it changes. But listeners, as always, we appreciate. We couldn't do this without you. So download, subscribe, tell your friends, tell your neighbors. Check out the website, talesofabundance.com. And that will be it until next week when we will dig further into abundance. Thank you, gentlemen. Listen and subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Click follow for more content like this, or go to talesofabundance.com to join our community and get free tools.